It's with great pleasure that I want to introduce to you Abel Polese from Dublin City University. When talking among Central Asian scholars, or any scholar in Europe on working on the former Soviet space, and you ask, do you know Abel? Then they always answer, you don't know Abel? So, through your grants, your multiple grants, your different projects, the fact that you're both in academia but also advising in the non-governmental sector and to official institutions, your networks are very extensive, and you have worked together with so many interesting people for probably more than a decade, I would say.
Yeah.
So we're very interested to hear your talk on the Scopus Diaries, a book that you wrote, I would say a couple of months ago it came out, right?
In January.
In January, so very recently. I read it myself. I really enjoyed the book from A to Z. It has very interesting hints and tips and recommendations for any scholar, even like for both starting scholars, aspiring scholars, as PhD students that are already a couple of years and know the drill. So I also learned quite a lot of stuff from that. And I'm very looking forward to hear your distilled version based on the interaction with the audience on it. So, Abel Polese, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm aware this is the last session of today. I'm aware you've been bombed with information. So, but usually when I present the Scopus Diaries, or even when I present whatever, I try to interact as much as possible. So, I'll just give you a short introduction on why this book is here, and then what I prefer to do is to present. I mean, the book is kind of relatively long, so what I usually do is I try to tailor the presentation to the needs of the public. So, of course, no need to talk about tenure if you don't know, if you're not looking for a job in academia, but you certainly have some concerns in your studies, in your doctoral studies, in your master studies, in your postdoctoral ventures, that you can share here and we can discuss. So just to introduce, this is a book about how to build your career and how to think strategically when you think as an academic. Not only as an academic, but also as a researcher. I mean, once you enter a research career, what do you need to do and what you do not need to do? Now, there are many books like this when you are in the corporate sector. But my impression is that in academia, there was very little. And you can find some sporadic here, some sporadic suggestions here and there, and you can find some books. But when I was preparing it, the idea was to give advice on not just on how things should be done in an orthodox way, but also to discuss also things that were behind the scenes. So what happens when you send your paper for peer review? And then, of course, if you go, I mean, I've been attending conferences and seminars of the competition. So people saying, oh, I'll give you a suggestion on how to publish a paper. So I was going there and listening to what is the advice that usually is distilled to PhD students. And I was happy to see that actually they were giving a very different advice. I mean, the advice they were giving was very politically correct. You need to polish your abstract. You need to go to the right journal. And so my book was kind of, I was trying to not to repeat the same advice and say, okay, you should do this, because you can find very good advice on blogs, on a number of places on how to do things in a conventional way. What I was trying to share was my experience and my kind of strategic considerations when I have to submit a paper, when I have to make a decision on whether to do something for free or not. Because in academia, many of the things you have to do are for free, and many of them are also not recognized. So shall we do things that are not recognized or not? If they ask you to do, if you have this impression, oh, I should peer review, okay, how much should you peer review? Should you peer review one paper per day or one per year? Maybe you should not peer review. But also, when everybody's asked, now you have to look for funding, you have to bring funding to the department, to the faculty. And my question is, why? Why do you need to do it? Not because you don't need to do it, but simply because maybe you should ask yourself first, what is this funding for? And do you really need funding for what you want to do? Or you just have to bring funding because your line manager is asking you? So a friend of mine defined the book as, the main message of the book as think. Do not tick boxes. So we know that we have to tick all the boxes, but if you tick all the boxes, you just don't have time to leave anymore. So if thinking allows you to prioritize, to basically give have a hierarchy of values and things that you want to do, and to find a way, to find a kind of compromise between what you want to do and what you have to do. Because for some things you cannot escape, you have to do them. For others, well, it's up to you. So that's the basic underlying message in the book. And I start from the point when academia was, romantically, academia, I would like to imagine academia as a much more simple or kind of basic world, where you have to teach and you have to do research sometimes. And now academia is no longer this kind of idle word, if ever this existed, because you have to do what you have to do. You have to do teaching, you have to do research, then you have to do publication. When you do publication, you have to do the right publication, so you have to choose the right outlets. And then you have to do fundraising, and then you have to manage projects, and then you have to go into committees, and then you have to peer review, and then you have to peer review applications, not only journals, articles, and then sometimes you have to read also, to peer review book proposals. You might want to write a book, and then you have to go to a conference, and then you prepare a conference presentation, and then more and more and more. And the question is, do you sleep? Do you have a family? Do you have friends? So that's the thinking about what are the basic things you need to do, allow you to minimize the time you devote on things that you do not necessarily like to do. Somebody could be a very good researcher and could be a very bad teacher. At this point, or somebody could the other way, could be a very good teacher, but very bad researcher. There is no point in lying to yourself and say, I need to do all of those things. But also, if last year I managed to publish 5 articles, this year, how many articles shall I publish to be happy? And do we really need to publish more articles or as many articles as last year to be happy, or there are other ways? So I'd like to take this session as an invitation for you to ask questions about, quoting an old movie, all the things you always wanted to know but you never dared to ask. So what are the things that you are, even just banal, or that you might want to know, or that you are supposed to learn by osmosis, like you are there, you're supposed to know where to publish and to know how to write an article, but actually eventually nobody ever explained to you. And this is, I think, that the value of the book, which doesn't say anything extremely new, but brings all the things that are in the corridors and just bring them in the same place. Of course, I had also my own experience. I like to think of this book as kind of half autobiographic, because most of the things you will read or hear, they come from my experience or from stories that I was told, or from things. But on the other hand, I just try to make it kind of universal in a sense that it could be readable and understandable by everyone. So the only thing is, because it seems that I have a microphone, I'll try to repeat the question or try to speak up when you talk. But I would like to start asking, what are your major concerns in your studies, or in the continuation of your studies? Once you finish, what are the main things that worry you, or that puzzle you, that you don't know how to approach them, you don't know how to tackle them, you don't know how to deal with them at this moment? Like, I'm writing a thesis, how shall I do with this? Or I need to publish a thesis, I don't need to publish a thesis, what shall I do after that? Yeah?
What I would like to ask is that if you think that it's more important to start publishing first, or first get a lot of experience in the work life and then publish.
Okay.
Do you think that publish without having lots of experience will take down your capability?
Okay, so the question, I think it was if it's important just to start publishing immediately as you start embarking in an academic career, or it's better to gather some experience, gather some more contacts, and then you start publishing, because you might not sound credible once you do this. Is there any question connected to this? Or I can start. Sorry? Do you have any other questions that I can connect, or I cannot connect, but it's...
Okay. I'm wondering about the possibilities for staying in academia. For those of us who like it so much, we want to stay here, but the contracts tend to be so few and far between, and oftentimes they're very short in duration. And so I'm wondering if you have any tips for these sorts of things after getting your PhD, how to... We all know that postdoc positions, there aren't terribly many of them around, and project positions, project research positions, you might get 3 months, you might get 2 months, you might get 6 months. But how to make a career out of this?
Okay, when you're talking of staying in academia, you're saying staying in academia, not in research, right? You don't want talking of...
It's either connected, it's completely connected.
What?
I'm hoping academia can involve teaching and research.
No, what I'm asking is, you can have some companies where they do research. So you go into a big company and your role is as a researcher. So you're going to do the same thing you do for academia, but just targeting the private sector. So I'm just making sure you say, no, I want to be in a university or in a classical research center. I'm not meaning any labs, any think tanks, any other institution that still involves research, but it's not directly involved. I mean, academia is usually referred to universities, kind of those kind of the ivory towers. Whereas research, I intended more broadly, any kind of work. You could work in a bank. If in a bank you're doing research on risk, or kind of think of control risk, or all the companies that are doing research on, if I want to invest in Congo, is it convenient or not? It involves research. So that's a research career. So you're talking of staying in a university. Okay. So those are two things. Well, let me start chronologically. I don't think that there is an answer to this. I think the publication should come the moment when you have something to say and you have something to share. So if you start your PhD and you're working in a lab, and in your lab you do an experiment, it could be psychology, it could be biology, and as a result of the experiment there is something, then I don't see why you should not be publishing. At the same time, I understand that most of you are from social sciences, and in the social sciences, articles are usually longer, and they're based on reflections, and sometimes on field work, sometimes on kind of elaboration of existing literature. So I think it's a bit more, and they're usually kind of single-authored, dual-authored. They don't have this kind of huge teams of people where you have to work with somebody higher. So in the as a result, what I would suspect is that the average, I don't have any kind of figures, but the average age or kind of seniority of somebody publishing in the social sciences is higher than somebody publishing in the hard sciences. That said, the question you're asking is a bit paradoxical, because it's like, it's the first job. If I never had a first job, nobody will hire me because they want work experience. Credibility is given by publication. So if you don't publish, there's no way that you can gain credibility before publishing. The only thing you should avoid is to publish in very kind of dodgy and odd outlets. But as long as people, and of course, people start seeing your name here and there, and then they get more used to you. But still, there is no definition of credibility. The world is big, the academic world is big, so there is no reason why your article should kind of pop up into the eyes of that very editor or that very editor. True also that if you go to a conference and if you start kind of mingling with a very specific circle of people, so your topic is very, very narrow, and the people working on that are only like 15 people, and you engage with them, it's going to be easier to listen to you because people will know you personally rather than be anonymous. So if in terms of having a reputation, you mean like being part of a circle, it's probably strategically, it's probably easier. Just because when an editor sees your article, they will say, oh yeah, I remember, this was the person I spoke to at the conference. And not necessarily I spoke of academic things. It could simply be that you had a very nice conversation and he remembers that you are kind of a very pleasant person, you're a good communicator, and that gives you a completely kind of different attitude to the person who is kind of receiving your article. As for staying in academic careers, there are several patterns, there are several paths I can see. I mean, of course, we'd like to think of the easiest one is the classical, like, I get a PhD, after a PhD I get a postdoc, after a postdoc I get another postdoc, or I get a kind of junior position, and then from there I move into tenure. That's what, but through this path, statistics show that, I mean, I don't know if this could be considered, but let's say that 1 out of 7 will have this chance. So we still have 6. And 1 out of 7, they're usually the ones who can stay within the system, can move in the system, and they have some kind of predisposition for the system. Then you have a number of other careers that you can have. I'm thinking of the Scandinavian or even the German world, where a research career means one research project to the other. I mean, I have friends who have been basing their career on research projects. But I'm thinking primarily of Germany, where you could have like 5 years, or in some cases 6, and in some cases even 12 years. In this case, you go from your PhD to your retirement. I mean, it's theoretically possible. It's of course a bit stressful if you get to year 4 and you don't have a follow-up project, because then you're going to say, okay, what's going to happen next? But still, it is possible. Another model could be, and it's possible, and it is also possible that by doing this, at some point you cannot develop the skills that you need to be hired by another university, so you move to another country. Another model is swinging in between academia and non-academia. That could be you stay part-time or once in a while in a university, or you have an affiliation to the university. When there is a contract, you stay at the university. When there is not, you could work as a consultant, or you could work for the private sector, still in research, or in research and training, which is no more, no less. In many respects, research and training is nothing. There's nothing much very diverse from what you do in academia, just for different targets. And the last option is to outsource yourself, which is with a PhD from a good university, especially if you are kind of, okay, in your case you're based in Finland. So with a PhD, there are a number of institutions outside Europe that would be happy to have a lecturer with a PhD from a prestigious European university. In that case, your added value, I mean your value on the market is much higher. And you can compete much better, especially if you are a junior scholar. Because if you're a junior scholar, maybe you don't have enough publications. But don't forget, in some places, professors do not have a PhD. So you enter a new world. You might have kind of initial barriers, like, I don't know anyone, I'm a foreigner. But at the same time, your profile would be much higher. And this is the case. I mean, I have a few colleagues that have been able to move to other universities, in some cases even to very good universities. I mean, in some cases, this has been a kind of a career boost for them. It's been a kind of the chance of a lifetime. I had a friend who was kind of precarious in Italy. And at some point, he just decided, okay, I understand that. And he was waiting for a position to open. And at some point, he understood that there was no position opening in the next 5 years. So he started looking for a job, and he moved to Hong Kong. And now he's a professor in Hong Kong. Yes, of course, he cannot. I mean, he's a bit far from the place he was born. But at the same time, he's an associate professor on the track to full professor, and he's kind of my age. And this is something that would never be possible there. So you have different options. It's just that when usually we think of an academic career, we think of a classical path, which is also the easiest one to imagine. But I'm not sure to what extent this is viable for all of us. Yeah.
What are the limitations for a foreigner to apply to a job in the private sector? For example, I'm not a national from the EU,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm interested in working in think tanks and doing research in international security. But I don't know how, if the private sector usually sponsors foreigners, or how is the private sector in the EU or abroad?
Well, private sector in the EU depends on the private sector in each member country. And the usual, of course, it's easier for a given job to give a job to a EU national just because there is no paperwork. But to me, the general general idea is that if they're interested, they will take you. But this could be, I mean, not being a EU national, looking for a job in the EU, might be a very high barrier in the beginning, because you have no publication. There is no reason. I mean, there is no added value in hiring you. I mean, they could say, yes, I see you're motivated, but there are also other people motivated, and so you really have. I mean, there is more work that you have to do at the connection level, where they're gonna know that you have those characteristics, because okay, a CV says many things, but there are also other things. I mean, a perfect CV doesn't say if the person is mad or not. I mean, you could hire somebody who has the best publication track record and somebody who has a degree in the best university. And yeah, I'm just thinking of a friend of mine was working at a university, and they were late with recruitment. So I won't share the name of the university, also because this has been recorded. But they were late with recruitment, and then it was kind of shuffling around CVs, and they found this person with a PhD from a very prestigious university. And it's like, wow. The only odd thing of the CV was that there was no chronological list of jobs. It was geographical. So I worked this year and this year in, I don't know, Belarus. And I worked this year and this year in Spain. And this year in US. It looked old, but it's okay. And because they were late, they did not check the reference letters. So they hired this person. This person, at some point, I mean, in the course of the year, was absolutely horrible. I mean, he was asking very odd questions. He had all this kind of the list of infinite books they had published with very weird, dodgy publishers about anything. And he was just asking things, and he was like, oh, but this is an ecumenical question. And I mean, basically, this breaking the dynamic of a conversation, of a seminar within the university. After 6 months, finally somebody decided to check his references. So they wrote to the person that had been indicated as a referee, I mean, as a reference for the job, and the reply they received just one line: I would not, under any conditions, hire this person. Basically, okay, this was a mistake from the recruiter side, but this is also something, I mean, to make you aware of the fact that this happens. And because the recruiter wants to avoid this, when you see a CV, you could see very good profile. At the interview, there are people that can lie perfectly. The question arises when you interact daily with this person. When this happens, you don't want to have somebody who is not proper for the job. So you don't want to have somebody who is leaving too early because a recruitment procedure is long. So if I'm going through the trouble of organizing all those things, and then going into recruitment and then shortlisting, I'm spending money and time, I don't want this person to leave after 6 months. So I don't want the person who is overqualified, because this person who is overqualified will feel, first of all, will try to leave as soon as possible, or they will just stay there and be very frustrated and will not perform, because we know that motivation is one of the main engines in whatever job, whatever your motivation is. So this is one side. On the other hand, also because in many universities the procedure is public, and it's going to be very difficult to fire somebody if this person is not fit for the job, it's basically like a marriage. It's a marriage with very difficult divorce. You don't want to marry the wrong person. So you want to be sure that this person is not just the most qualified for the job, but is also somebody who is not bringing anarchy into the department or into the faculty. And here comes the role of networking. So in your case, I mean, a friend of mine used to say there are always 10 people more qualified than you for a job. You just have to hope that they will not apply. But in your case, if you're able to show that you're not just motivated, but you're also a team worker, that once you're there will be no trouble with you, and that you're kind of willing to stay and so on, you might be preferred to somebody who is a EU national, even if they have to go through, through the trouble of getting all the paperwork. But maybe the company is big enough to have somebody to deal with them. They have an agency. They have, or they will outsource it to you, and they will have to spend 2 days at the local office. But it's still possible. I'm just saying that in principle, I mean, there is no formal, like in Canada, you usually write an announcement, Canadian nationals that will have, that would be preferred to any other candidates. There is not this thing is not for, in Europe is not really formally, and it also depends on the market. I mean, there are some countries where nobody wants to work, relatively nobody wants to work. So competition is much lower. And there are, I mean, of course, as a non-EU national, you go to Oxford and they will say, goodbye, I mean, why are you coming here? I mean, I have 200 people killing their family just to be able to come to the interview, and I will have no troubles at all in getting a work permit. Well, Brexit allowing, but then they have you, and they say, why should I hire you? But you go somewhere else where nobody wants to go, University of Lostenhurst, somewhere, and they will say, yes, please come here. But I'm not a EU national. We don't care, just come. So it's really like, it's supply and demand. And it's a bit more networking from your side, because you have to convince them that you are an extra trouble, if you allow me, but then you have to convince them that going this extra mile is going to be worth it. Yeah?
What point would you like to consider yourself an expert in the subject?
Well, there is the PhD curve. You start thinking you know everything, and you end up. So the question, in case it was not here, when can you consider yourself expert? So you start with I know everything, and the more you go into your PhD, the more you understand you know nothing. So it's not about being an expert, and it's the same. I mean, to me, that's the same question when you are junior, when you're senior, when you move from junior to senior. There is no real definition of junior or senior. I mean, there are some formal things, like it could be like more than 5 years work. So you're an expert if you've been living in the country, or if you've been doing this for more than 5 years or 3 years. At the same time, you're an expert whenever you feel confident to talk about something, admitting your limitations. So admitting that you don't know everything, and actually there are lots of things you don't know, and probably there are more things you don't know that you know. But this doesn't bother you. I mean, doesn't inhibit you. It doesn't stop you from saying, well, on my little, this is what I think. And you're an expert also, in my view, if you can stay modest enough that even if you feel that you know a lot, you can still kind of approach a topic or speak to people, not pretending that you know more than them. There is no other, but then it's really very, very personal in this respect.
Then, for instance, I have some interest in economics, and I'm a bachelor's in engineering, but now I'm doing political sciences.
Can you speak up? Okay.
So I'm now doing political sciences, but I have also an interest in engineering and economics. Could I write for a magazine something about economics, even though I don't have any degree in that subject? For instance, is that allowed, or how do people go about it?
I wouldn't think of not having a degree as relevant, because you have many people who have been expert. They've been studying mathematics and they end up teaching political science. You have people who start a career from one side to the other. You have scientists, even scientists have been combining disciplines without studying them. So a degree, in many respects, is a formal confirmation of knowledge. But if you spend the next 5 years studying only economics in your house, reading economics textbooks, and you have no degree, there is no reason why you should be less qualified than somebody who has a degree in economics. and you are likely to be more qualified than somebody who has a PhD, has a degree in economics, but has just passed the exams because they need to pass the exam because the parent told them you have to pass the exams. And you've been doing this with passion. I don't see, I mean, degrees are a way to spend less time evaluating people. You have a degree, I know that you've been endorsed by someone, that you know something. But degree can be also replaced by other things. So it's, I mean, in some cases, say experience, where you have to see what kind of experience. But you have lots of very successful entrepreneurs or like very successful people who have been learning, they think that the hard way, just trial, error, or fail again, fail better, and they know it. And they can, I mean, and those people are often even invited into universities. How are you doing this? I mean, and they can explain things in a different way. So there is, I would not define an expert, I will not kind of discern an expert from a non-expert by the kind of degree, the number of degrees they have. A degree can kind of make me feel more comfortable. And in our society, a degree is something that, okay, you've done it. But if you are able, I mean, Steve Jobs, just make, I mean, I wanted to use Mark Zuckerberg, but I prefer, I mean, think of Steve Jobs that was just going to classes and never passed an exam. I mean, he passed the exam, but he never got a final degree. I think he has achieved, I mean, he could be defined as some kind of expert in something. Yeah? But I need you to speak up because or take the microphone because. Huh? Okay.
I have a question. I am a law PhD student in University of Cambridge, and my supervisor told me she don't suggest me to publish when I am a PhD student because she think it's dangerous. I don't know how to understand the dangerous. As I know, it's the same as German. So what do you think of this? And the second,
dangerous to publish.
Yes.
They would send killers to your house.
No, I don't know. I'm not sure. And the second question is, because I'm a Chinese student, I signed the agreement between Chinese government with French universities. So after graduation, I have to return China. But in China, if I want to look for a job in university, I have to publish. So it's complicated. And if I want to publish in journal, maybe you know, SSCI, it stands for high quality journal.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is how to choose the proper journal for us, especially for PhD student.
Okay. Yeah, I'm shocked by the define dangerous to publish. I mean, if you live in a country and you publish against a certain dictator, it's dangerous. But I don't think what she said just made me think of a friend of mine and a friend of Adrian, who's not here, who sent his first article to a journal that it was a very good journal. And then when his professor or a colleague learned that he had to send this article without knowing anyone in the editorial board, say, are you crazy? I mean, they don't know you. So that's the closest to the danger that you mentioned. And the point was that because he was not known, probably his article would be reviewed as a kind of anonymous scholar that we don't know or we don't care about. In the end, he got through. I mean, he writes very well, and he eventually got through. So this makes me think of two things, to publish and how to choose your outlet for publishing. Now, let me start from the outlet to publish, because once you choose the outlet, then you can have different strategies. To choose your outlet, you have to check where you want to have your career, or where you want to have your scholarship, or when you want to have your life. Because the way science is evaluated in different countries might be very, very different. So there is no point in going to the best journal of something, and then you discover that actually the country you wanted to work in doesn't value the journal. So the first thing to do is, if you want to have a career in China or in any other world, just check what is the national assessment, what is the national assessment review exercise for science based on what are the journals, what are the books, what are the publishers, what are the and once you know this, then you can just start a list of, you can make a list of journals that are possible targets. Now, those journals, they need to respond to some criteria, but also not all journals are the same. So the question is, do I need to, say that, I usually do the example with Scopus, with the Scopus database. So in the Scopus database, you have, I don't remember how many thousand of journals. They're all there. So in some systems, it is sufficient to publish in one Scopus journal. Now, Scopus journals are very different in scope, in readership, in prestige. So you're mentioning SS, the Social Science Citation Index. Yeah, the Social Science Citation Index is an index. It is based on whenever a journal applies, and they are made part of this index. Now, in this index, you will have top journals of the world, but they also have kind of mid-range journals, and we also have low journals. Low-level journals that are not kind of anonymous or kind of very low quality, but it's just that relatively they perform worse than the best ones. Now, if for your national evaluation system, publishing in the top journal or in the last journal is the same, and yet then it's your choice how to do it. If you publish in the top journal, it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to take much longer, but it's going to give you much more prestige. If you publish in the lower journal, it is probably going to be easier because you have fewer people going there, because most people just go to the main journal. It's probably going to be faster because they have fewer articles to process. But it's also going to be less prestigious. Now the question is, what do you need to get? To start an academic career? Do you need a top journal? Do you need a number of articles? Because in some cases, like you have one article every 5 years in the top journal. It's like, okay, it's not producing anything. Or you can have 5 articles that take much less in kind of low journals. You say, okay, at least he's producing 1 article per year, which is a bit more. So it really depends. And also you say China. China is big, as you know. So it really depends if you want to enter Renmin or you want to enter Shanghai or you want to enter a university in a city which is less populated or where fewer people want to go. In those cases, they will be, I would bet they will be very, very happy that you at least have publications. Whereas if you go into Renmin, you need to have top publications in the country, and then people there, they publish in good journals. So it's a matter of strategy, where you want to go back, which part of the country, and how you want to go back. As somebody who is considered kind of not very productive, but once they produce, they have a very top article, or as somebody who says, he does the job. Yeah.
My question is about. Thank you, first of all, for the book. I would say you must have this book. It's very good. Thank you. My question is about participating in the conference and immediately having an offer for publisher. What do you think about this tradition? Is it commonly used tradition of some publishers that follow all the conferences and offer you?
Okay, let me ask a question. Are you talking of an email sent to everyone saying we're going to publish your paper?
No.
Or you're talking of an email where the chair of the panel says, our panel was very good, I'm thinking of publishing the thing?
No, my question is about after the conference you receive an email on your personal name from a publisher, which I don't know. And they say they liked.
They loved your paper, yeah.
So,
Okay.
what do you think about it?
Do you know the quote about, the quote by Groucho Marx? I would never be part of a club that would accept me as a member. So if they propose you to publish, it means they don't have, with all respect, we have to be humble. So if somebody writes to me and say, I would like to publish your paper, I think why somebody is going all the way to publish my paper? I mean, nobody knows me. I mean, why? I mean, especially if you say, oh, we want to publish you in China or you want to publish in New Zealand. Nobody knows me. Why they would go all the way and ask me to publish a paper? So to me, that's usually a scam or a predator publisher or else. I understand that it's very, very kind of enhancing your ego that somebody says, Jamal, we love your paper. You know, it's like, it's a 2.0 version of the 80s. You have beautiful eyes. That's more or less the same thing. The point is, if you want to fall for it, please. But my point would be, it's very rare, especially if you are not a Nobel Prize or somebody who is widely known for their work, that somebody comes to you and say, we really want to publish with you. You might have, I mean, that say there are some exceptions, but that are more personal. There is somebody who has met you, and you have spoken your research, about your research, and this person will say, well, actually, even if you are kind of a young scholar, I think your topic fits very well what I want to do. So we would like to do it. Or sometimes after a conference paper, you have, that's why I was asking, the chair or the organizer would say, actually, it was a very good discussion. I think it might be worth to go into a special issue of a journal or to have a book about this, because the papers, they came together very, very nicely, and I think they would make a good debate. So you have those things. But once it's a very personal but unpersonal email, just explaining how beautiful you are, honestly, I not just delete the publisher, I also put it as a spam. Yeah, but then it's very far.
Thank you. Maybe you could say something about other activities which could add some values in our CV. I mean, expect the articles. Because I think not every conference or internship could add some values in our CV.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could advise where we should research for such possibilities.
Okay. Well, the provocative answer is that anything and everything has a value in a CV. The question is for whom? The question is the unspoken value, an unspoken message of whatever you're doing. So you could be doing anything. The question is, who is going to value this thing? And this, only you can answer this question, because where you want to go after. I know it's the $1 million question. What do you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? I know, but it's like more or less you need to know in which sector, in which country you want to move.
For example, the career outside the academia. In general, in humanities in the Central Asia region.
Okay, that's a nice thing because it's a case study. The general answer is anything is fine. Then you have to see outside of academia, but then why would you look for what would be the connection between your academic degree or or you're just asking for advice for general job search? Because are you talking from a perspective of somebody who finished a PhD and then they want to find an alternative in the real world, or you're talking from somebody who is studying and say I know I never want to be an academic?
No, for example, after the PhD, I'm not interested in staying in academia or being like professor here, but still I want to use my knowledge, my experience, and I know not for everybody. Not every employee will interested in my articles, or like I did some lectures during my study. Which activities could add some value?
Okay, the PhD is positive and negative, to the point that you might want to hide the PhD at some point. In some places, like Germany, as a public servant, you will have to pay. You have to be paid according to your experience. So if you have a PhD, you have to be paid more than somebody who has a master. So when you're competing on the market and have two people with the same qualifications, I would choose the master. Because, unless I need somebody with a PhD for the post. But because usually posts, you don't really need a PhD to apply for some posts, for some positions. then you would say, why would I just have to spend more money with this person? A PhD is also negative on a CV in some respects, because you learn to do very well something, but it's very rare, given the ways PhD studies are structured, that you learn to do anything else. So my impression, when I see a generic PhD, I would say, this person might be very analytical, but might have very low skills in problem solving, or very low skills in communicating with people. You can finish a PhD without having no kind of PR skills, simply because your PhD was in philosophy. You were spending the whole day in the library, and then it's like, okay, what's the connection? When there's the last time you saw someone? Well, maybe in 2016, but it was just a pizza man. So that's the negative side. The positive side could be, as a PhD, you learn to think analytically. You learn to kind of pull together causes and effects. You learn to do you learn to work systematically. You learn to gather data and to process those data, and then to come up with results. So even if you're talking about private sector, the private sector is huge. There's not one private sector. But you could, depending on where, first of all, what I would do, because I would just see what positions are available in Central Asia or in other places with the qualification that I have. So in which position, of course, if you go to Kazakhstan and you want to work as a manager in an oil company, your skills are completely useless. But you might want to see those oil companies, maybe they have a risk analysis section, or they have a problem-solving section, or they have a section, they have a kind of unit, right? Or what are the other opportunities you might have in Poland, as in Central Asia, for those things? There could be think tanks. There could also be companies. That could also be, if you have a PhD, depending on what PhD, if you have a PhD with kind of knowledge of the region, you know one or more languages from the region, you might want, I was once asked to work as a trainer in cultural adaptation of workers coming from the US to Moscow. So they would say, people come here, they have no idea what Russia is, they have no idea how things work. You might have to explain those things, because you know the two cultures, you know both cultures, you know both settings, so you might be able to explain. This could be a way. Depending on your specialization, you might want, but the first thing I would do is to go into job website and see what are the specifications, without even applying, what are the things that are required by somebody working in the region or on the region. And from there, then you can see what are the skills they kind of value. And this would also mean that being in a sector also means to learn a language, the technical language. The development sector, just to give an example, is always kind of ever evolving. And if you use the words that are fashionable now, it's not that you are just cool, it's that you follow the debates. Because if I have a worker, we now use this kind of terminology, and if we have a worker that using the terminology from 2 years earlier, what's going to happen is that, okay, probably this person has been out of the market for 2 years. Now, it's easy just to catch up because it's just words. But at the same time, I know that this person has not been very, very active. So whenever you learn, you read like evidence-based policy, evidence-based, needs-based, human rights-based approach, and those things. Those things are important as a code. It's like a password. It's like a secret code. You use those words, and in the sector, they understand that you are an insider, not an outsider. Those things you can only learn them when you go through the job market, and then going to the job market, you also understand the fraction, the sub part of the job market you wanna kind of move around, because depending on what is your motivation, working in a business company, working in the region could be very challenging. It could bring you much money, but it could be also very stressful and very, very profit-oriented. And maybe you are somebody who likes more, kind of say, I prefer to earn less, but to have more interaction with people, to have more satisfaction, or the other way around. I'm here only for the money, so just people can just stay outside. This is something you have to understand once you see those things. Maybe you have a huge mortgage, and then you decide, okay, for 1 year, I'm not going to be a person, I'm just going to be a robot, and I'm going to work just for money, and then I'm going to think about my life. Or, still, it's an exercise that you have to do for yourself. And that I was actually in a workshop on science advice a week ago, and my question was, not my question, but my point was the entry point to become a science advisor. There is no entry point, because every person who is a science advisor will give you a different story. I was one day walking in the street, and then I came across this person, and this person said, oh, well, or I was at a party, I got drunk with the ambassador, and then the ambassador said, or I was always working in advice, and then I moved into science, and then I became science advisor. I mean, everyone has a story. So the question I was asking the question I was trying to ask was not how to become a science advisor, because there is no way. It's something, the most elite position, the most kind of prestigious position, they have no fixed entry port. I mean, if you want to work as a manager in a bank, we know we have to do it. But if you want to be prime minister, we don't know what you have to do it, because it's your way. And you have to find your way around. So it's the same thing here. If you're looking for a job that is conventional, just look at the announcements. If you're looking for something which is a bit more tailored to your needs, then you have to understand how the market is moving, is evolving, and how your needs can fit the market. And there is no single strategy, because we are talking of kind of highly specialized or highly qualified workers for which there is no position. There is no opening for a PhD with 10 years of experience, 5 languages, and kind of experience in 5 continents. There is no such an opening. But you might understand, you might learn, by looking at the market, you might understand how to reframe, rephrase, kind of classify your qualifications in a way that fits that application, that market. And a publication is important for academia. For the private sector, might not be the publication, but it's the research behind the publication. So you might want to emphasize the fact, I've been leading a research team, doing those kind of interviews and those things, leading to those results. By the way, they got published in a very good journal, but the company will not be interested in that journal. They will be interested in your capacity to manage a team and to come to results. So the answer is that I have no answer. No one else? But it's time.
No, we still have at least 50 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah, but people are hungry and tired. Where's the ice cream there?
After that, can you send us the PDF version of this book? Sorry. After the class, can you send us the PDF version of this book?
Well, that's not a question. Of course.
I want to ask whether it's Facebook.
Okay, I explained the philosophy behind the book.
Yeah.
So there are many publishers in this world, and I once saw a book called How to Be an Academic Superhero, and the book was selling at €120. And my point was, well, maybe this should be called How to Be an Academic Poor Superhero, because if you buy the book, then you don't have money for the rest of the month. So what I have done is to look for a publisher that would publish at a price which is ridiculously low. So this book is selling at €6. And the paper copy, the paper version is selling at $19.90, but it should also go, should go down even. But anyway, what I was doing is I want to keep accessible to anyone, regardless of the fact that I can share the book privately for any purpose, and the fact that I can share it and say, if you find it useful, just order for the library. So just to inform you, Adrienne is going to order for your library. This was a position against or with regards to academic publishers that are usually very, very overpriced. So what I've been saying is I have no problem in sharing with anyone, but I also would like the company that has sponsored the project to stay in the market. So if out of 1, 2, 3, 4 people who read the PDF, somebody says, oh, I want to buy it because I want to support the project, that's money that is going to a company that has agreed to keep the price low instead of keeping those barriers, because the other books that I have, they all sell between 100 and 150 euro. And I will not be advertising them just to say, yeah, you have to buy my book, because I don't want you to spend 150 euro on the book. So.
Okay, I have a final my university can't afford the flight fees. Only my supervisor only for the registration fees. I think my fee is $300. So what do you know where I can look for the funding support? The source, funding source.
Wow. This is a very concrete question. I mean, I got
this book taught us. It can help us to look for finance support. I think it's a better choice for us, but specifically maybe website, foundation. I don't know.
Okay, I mean, I got this question quite often, so that's, and I work as a fundraiser.
Okay.
But whenever I train somebody in fundraising, I will never give a website. Simply because website or names, because the number of donors in the world is very, very large. And I cannot possibly know all of them, and I cannot possibly know which one is the best for your thing. So what I usually give is a strategy to look for funding here and there, and in situations that are even more challenging than yours. I mean, I was giving a workshop in Cape Verde, in Africa, last month, and the problem was even worse, because at least, I mean, let me tell you how lucky you are. You're based in Paris, and they're paying for your tuition fee. I was giving a workshop in a university that the country in itself, if you want to move to another city, you have to take a plane, because it's a set of islands, and there is no national funding. And also in Paris, if you want, there is a conference every day, a few conferences every day, and you can meet academics every day. Whereas in Praia, there's barely a conference. I mean, in the social sciences, I think there's one in September. I don't know when there will be the next one. So even the fact that you can know academics and they will help you is difficult. That said, when I was a PhD, I was looking for the oldest and wildest foundations here and there to see if they could give me some money. I mean, of course, you have university funds, then you have national foundations, you have international foundations. The fundraising sector is a sector, and there is a huge conference with, I don't know, it was 300, yeah, it was 300 participants every year in the Netherlands.
Is for registered fee, but flat fee, I think, is about $700.
Yeah. Yeah, but there is no answer to that. I mean, I don't have an answer to this. I mean, I have an answer to how to build a fundraising strategy, how to do it consistently, but how to find $700 for tomorrow? No, sorry.
Thank you.
So can you tell us the strategies?
Yeah, so you have to find somebody who is giving you money to do what you want to do. To be able to do this, they have to think that what you're doing is bringing them some kind of benefits. That could be economic benefits. That could be just visibility, publicity, or that could be any other thing. So the ways you would do, or that would just make them feel good. So the way you would I would approach the problem is, you have private donors. So you have science fundraising websites, crowdfunding, where you can say, of course, if every student starts saying, I need to go to this conference, give me the money, no. But if you have a good story, and you explain, and you motivate people, you have projects that are funded, especially because your target is not very high if you're just looking for a conference. I have some other friends who get funding by working with some colleagues in countries where there is money. So my friend is from Ukraine. He has not much money to go here and there, but he started a collaboration with colleagues in Germany and in Sweden. And this was for a project on Ukraine. So whenever they had to present the results, they would say, well, can you come? Actually, we don't have the time to go. Can you just go at our place and we pay for everything? And of course, it's even better now that English is the global word, is a global language, if you can work in another language. Because with English as a kind of global language, there are also many networks, at least within Europe, where there are German networks, at least. You have French networks. And those networks are the ones that are least known, because anyone with English skills will go into those ones. So if you join a research team doing something similar, and they don't have to be your it doesn't have to be your supervisor. It could simply be a research team that has extra money to do this and do this. Then it's one. Then it's another way of doing this. So you have direct fundraising, which is yours. You have crowdfunding. You have conference grants sometimes. So for scholars who have little money, they will offer some kind of reduction. What I was also doing, I was checking the conferences. I mean, of course, it's nice to go to the most prestigious conference here and there, but you could also be kind of a bit more modest and say, okay, where can I go with the money I have? So when I was based in Ukraine for my field work, and I saw a conference that was on the border between Ukraine and Poland, and another one Lithuania, I was able to go there with relatively no money, because the ticket within Ukraine at the time was like 10, 20 euro. You get there, and then they pay for the hotel and the accommodation, so you just have a conference. From that conference, you meet people, and you start new collaborations. The same thing was I went once to Lithuania, and there was a very fortunate thing. I don't remember how I got there. I think like 2 buses. But usually the rule is if you have no money, you have time, or if you have no time, then you have to use money. So going there, it made me meet somebody who was managing a special issue of a journal, which is a top journal. And because she liked my presentation, she invited me into the journal. I mean, to write for the journal. And then I got, even before finished my PhD. No, in the end it was published after. But very immediately after my PhD, I got a publication in a top journal. It was not in the field I needed, but it was a very good journal. And so I spent some money, and then I was for staying there, I would use some kind of social networks, asking, can somebody host me for free? And then somebody eventually shows up and say, yes, you can stay at my place. I have a place on the floor. You do it if you have no money. Of course, the day you become rich, you don't sleep on the floor anymore. But it's not that bad. So there is what you call fundraising, but there also what I say fund saving, which is like spending the minimum amount of money to get something done. So of course, if you apply for a conference to the US, it's going to be very difficult to swim there. But if you apply for a conference in Europe and you buy the tickets much in advance, between low-cost airfares, air companies, and trains or buses that go, you might be able to get there not very in a way. And if you also manage to, for instance, if the conference in a city you always wanted to visit, there will be an additional motivation. Say, I always wanted to go to Paris, and then now the conference is there, so I can also invest some of my own money, because after the conference I will stay 2 more days, and I will also finally visit the city. And I never had the chance to go before, and I know that I would not just take and go to the place because it's too expensive like this, but as a conference, then the value is that I get relaxed, but I also get contacts and I get some kind of professional value. And when you go to a conference, of course, you need to maximize. Once you go there, you need to maximize, especially if it's like the only conference of the year, you need to maximize your stay. Which means I had some friends who were doing every day, just try to get at least 10 business cards from people, which will oblige you to talk to at least 10 people. One of them might be the right one, might be the one that invites you for a postdoc, invites you for a publication, invites you for a conference. My strategy was always, don't go to panels, go to the book fair. So yeah, I go to panels from time to time, but the book fair is the place where everybody's going and they don't feel like going to panels. So you meet people with alike attitudes, and then you start a conversation at some point, and then it's like, oh, you fun. Do you want to we have a conference next month? Do you want to come? I mean, myself, I have sometimes conferences and I don't have enough people. And then at some point you start to invite people like, okay, you've finished your call for papers, and then you have one place, it's like, shall I just waste this money or I can invite someone? And I say, okay. And this is how informal invitations go. I got invited to a conference in Zagreb just the day before, I was teaching in Rijeka kind of a couple of weeks ago, and then one of the director of the center was like, okay, but then tomorrow you have to go with me in Zagreb because then it's a good conference. I want you to come. We have somebody who just canceled. I said, okay. So she took me by car, so I didn't pay for the transport, and they put me in a hotel in a kind of, it was really, really a good hotel, a historical building from the like 19th century, and then all the meals were paid. I went to a Michelin restaurant for dinner, and I went there. I did my intervention at the conference, and I was invited just because there was leftover money because some other people had cancelled. And I was just in the right place at the right time. And I had the time because it was a Friday. I didn't have to teach that day. So you know the joke about there is a man who's driving a car, and then the car breaks down. And then he calls a mechanician. He comes, and then he's just checking the car. Do you have a hammer? Yeah. Just hits the car with the hammer, and the car starts again. Boom. Wow. How much should I give you? Well, $100. $100? But you work 1 minute. You just hit I say, well, $1 is just for the hammer hit. $99 is to find the place where you have to hit. So you never know where your next funding will come from. But if you don't look for it, you will never find it. Yeah.
I'm still going to steal a question from you. Something that's been bothering me more and more the last months. How do you work? Because I know it's different for everybody else, for anyone. How do you maintain like a more or less healthy work-life balance? Being around in academia as long as you have, especially since you have a lot of experience into like project management as well. I was wondering, how do you do it?
You mean how Abel or how anyone?
Well, we can choose to answer also from your personal point of view, because I think there might be universal models for everybody, like everybody's different, but at least would be nice to hear your answer.
Well, I think as long as you do what you like to do, your body is kind of positively motivated to do things. I mean, one thing is to wake up every day, I have to go to work. And one thing is to wake up every day and say, okay, let's see what today is kind of reserving me. And I think that kind of your energy and your kind of motivation and attitude changes a lot in the way you kind of approach your job. Also, and I also think you should kind of find a way I'm much more productive when I have no time than when I have time. Because when I have no time, I know that like 3 hours are there, then the kids are there, and then I have to go, and then I have 3 hours I will not spend. When I have the whole day, it's like, okay, some tea, well, a couple of biscuits, okay, back and forth, okay, now some fruits, yeah. So that's another thing. And the third thing, so work less, work better. The third thing is learn to do what you have to do quickly so you can concentrate on what you like to do. And the fourth thing is, which is an addition of age, it's like try also to do, I was always doing it, but try to do things that have nothing to do with your work. So for me, for many years, I've been just reading non-academic books, which I read more than academic books. And I think they help your creativity because they help you thinking in a different way. Or reading popular science, but from other disciplines. I mean, I read a lot. I've been reading a lot of evolution, biology, genetics, and they just give me a different perspective on things. And the last thing is something that I enjoy now is just to do sport. I mean, to be active, just do some activity, go for a long walk, go to a park. I know it's when I'm stressed, I'm the first one I don't want to go because I have. But then in the long run, it pays. It pays back, because you say, okay, I haven't done anything for work, but at least I've been swimming for an hour, so it's good. So basically, to me, the best way to work better is not to work. I mean, it's to work less.
Okay. Any other final questions, or was mine the final one? Abel, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.